Hello, Player One. Welcome to the Gaming History Club. My name is Gabby.
Hello, and I'm JP, and today we are exploring one of gaming's most complicated quests addiction.
Whether we're talking about the late night, just one more level sessions, or real life stories of players who couldn't put the controller down, this is a part of gaming history that's both fascinating and sobering.
We'll look at how games are built to keep us engaged, the psychology behind the hooks, and where fun sometimes turns to obsession. So let's open this loot box and talk addiction in video games.
Alright, Player One, strap in, because today we're tackling quite a heavy one. Trigger warning right from the start, by the way. We'll be talking about some extreme cases of gaming addictions, including ones that sadly resulted in death, and also some references to drugs in this episode.
Yeah, this is quite naturally going to be quite a serious one, but we'll also keep it balanced, of course. There'll be a bit of history, a bit of psychology, a dash of cultural trivia, and of course, that classic gaming history club philosophizing along the way. So, we're going to look at how video game addiction has been studied, what makes games addictive, who's most at risk, how different regions have responded to the problem globally, and where the industry itself might be pushing things a little too far. And spoiler alert, they really are pushing things too far. But don't worry, there'll be jokes and tangents along the way, because nothing says fun Wednesday evening like talking about compulsion, brain chemistry, and loot boxes.
So, before we dive in headfirst into gaming, let's set the ground rules. What do we actually mean when we say addiction? At its core, addiction is when someone keeps doing something despite negative consequences. Doesn't matter if it's substance, an activity, or I don't know, playing just one more round of Tetris at 3 a.m. when you're supposed to sleep.
Yeah, you should probably be doing other things at 3 a.m. Possibly sleeping would be good. But yeah, the addiction definition is actually quite a long, complex one. It's very medical, it's very scientific, but in a nutshell, you got it completely right, Gabby. You're doing things despite negative consequences. And traditionally, there are two very general categories of addiction. So, first, we have the chemical addictions, of course. So, your alcohol and your drugs, anything where a substance is what actually gets your brain hooked, okay? But then the other type is behavioral addiction. So this is more like gambling, shopping, social media scrolling at 3 a.m., and yeah, of course, also video games.
The thing is, both types actually hijack your brain in very similar ways. It's not just chemical versus psychology, because whether it's cocaine or Candy Crush, the same reward pathways are being lit up like a pinball machine.
Now, video games have been around since the early 70s, but somehow it wasn't until the 80s that psychologists and psychiatrists slowly started taking addiction more seriously in gaming. Meanwhile, the public wasn't actually thinking about addiction in video games at all. No, their big moral panic was still, is Nintendo going to rot your brain? And is Mortal Kombat corrupting our children into spine ripping hooligans?
Or, of course, my favorite, when video games were literally thought to be the devil's handiwork by some people, right?
Right.
Yeah, during those satanic panic era.
It sounds like a fun song, but no, it was quite the contrary.
Yeah, no, not really. So, yeah, instead of being reasonable and asking a simple question, why people were escaping into games, the conversation was more like, "Oh, ban this evil corrupting our innocent youth."
Yeah, for the public, it wasn't until the 2000s where worldwide we finally started looking at games more objectively and neutrally. So we were acknowledging both the positives now of gaming and also the negatives. And without a doubt, addiction in video games or gaming disorder is by far the biggest and most dangerous negative aspect of video games. Coming to think about it, is there even any other serious negative aspects of video gaming? Probably just playing multiplayer online and listening to people shouting around and getting annoyed.
Right, but we're talking history, right? So, first, Let's get back to 1982 when three doctors at Duke University noticed something strange. They had patients obsessed with space invaders. I mean, who wouldn't, right? But these ones, they were so obsessed that they actually coined the term space invaders obsession. One patient delayed his honeymoon just to squeeze in one more hour of blasting aliens and space invaders.
Wow. I mean, I love playing video games, but I don't know if I would delay our honeymoon just to play Space Invaders.
I mean, you wouldn't because I wouldn't let you.
Yeah, fair point. Another one of the patients actually took his fiancée out on dates, and get this, Gabby, he made her sit down just to watch him play Space Invaders.
You would never get away with that with me, by the way, because probably I will be joining you
Yeah, of
playing
course.
instead. So, yeah, different reasons. But
Yeah,
yeah.
we would choose a two-player game to enjoy together, right? Yeah, but seriously, the doctors, they thought that the obsession wasn't actually about the game itself. It was actually a way for these men of coping with the stress of commitment and marriage. And weirdly enough, their compulsion playing the game stopped once they actually did get married.
Wait, so basically, they felt okay after actually being committed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so perhaps gaming disorder can be solved by the simple act of marriage.
Oh, is that the end of the episode then? We found a cure.
Well, no, because we're not the official psychologists here, Gabby.
That's true.
Yeah, but I have a feeling I may have found the answer.
Okay, don't take that as an advice, by the way, player one. We're just joking here.
Right. Well, back to the history then. So, that same year, 1982, another researcher described something very similar, but they called it computer catatonia. And they were describing basically a trance like fixation with gaming and a strong preoccupation. So, that you are basically losing track of time because you were so engrossed into playing games.
Then a year later, in 1983, came the first time we actually saw the words video game addiction in print. Two school counselors, Soper and Miller, published Junk Time Junkies.
Another good song.
Yeah,
Satanic Panic and Junk Time Junkies. No, wait. Satanic Panic by the Junk Time Junkies.
yeah.
Nice.
By the way, we call this episode Game Junkie
Because we like crime junkies
because
so
we
much.
like Crime Junkie.
Yeah, that's a great podcast.
Yeah, we love that. But anyway, beside the point. So yeah, Soper and Miller published Young Time Junkies. They described the same hallmarks you'd see in other behavioral addictions: compulsive behavior, lack of interest in anything else, only hanging out with other gamers, and withdrawal symptoms like the shakes when you try to stop.
Yeah, but you know what, Gabby? If all of this sounds a little bit unscientific and sumptuous, well, I think that's because it definitely is as well. So these early studies, they sound more like kind of prejudgments, like preconceived notions, and they feel a lot like case reports because they all had like a tiny sample size, like Space Invaders obsession. They were talking about just, three men and, all male, and it's kind of anecdotal evidence. So they're more like observations in general and kind of not hard science. But still, nonetheless, the foundation was being laid for serious addiction research, and this is the first time people are actually calling it video game addiction.
Which brings us to 1989 and the first big study, Margaret Shotton's work on gaming addiction and computer dependency. And this one, unlike the earlier scare stories, her research actually asked the important questions: what is gaming addiction? Who's vulnerable from it? And what games are most addictive? How do we even study this? And what are the risk factors?
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of like the basic scientific method, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sounds like what you're supposed to ask in the first place when you're researching something.
Yeah, but you know what? Apart from just this really cool scientific approach now by Margaret Shotton, what else for me makes her really stand out is that she refused to like demonize and judge her patients. So she actually said herself that she found most of them were highly intelligent, motivated, and even successful people. but often they were just misunderstood by society. Which honestly makes me like her even more. It's not just, oh no, the nerds are doomed. She basically said, hey, maybe these aren't broken, addictive people. Maybe a part of them is just a little bit different, and it's not always like, a straight up addiction.
Yeah, and it's great that she did this. But on the other hand, it's also sad that it took as long as 1989 for a researcher to pick up on this. Nerd culture in general at this point and video games were already decades old, right? So what's the big deal all of the sudden? As if a person have other interests outside of sports and traditional arts seems to be like really strange and really wrong, basically. I mean, come on.
Yeah, it was nothing new, like, honestly, but I guess a real scientist had to step in here, huh?
True. Yes.
Well, okay, that was a lot of research back to back, but something I want to mention as well is the interesting timing as well, though, because these early addiction studies, they came right at the peak of the arcade boom, actually, thinking of 82, 83 when we finally coined the term,
Hmm.
and this kind of really, comes in hand when things like the NES was also exploding in living rooms, and home computers were also, of course, slowly becoming more common household objects rather than just inside of universities and laboratories.
Yeah, so you've also got teenagers huddled around Pac-Man cabinets and also the so to say geeks tinkering with programming languages on their home computers. It's just more common, isn't it?
Yes, it's more common, but then people still think of these things as like playing with toys, which I find really strange. But that was just the thing back in the day, I suppose. But slowly, people were starting to realize that there is something bigger going on here as well than just games can rot your brain and Satanic Panic featuring the Junkies. Games were also powerful enough to shape real behaviors and not always in harmless ways.
Yes, which brings us to the next level. What is it actually about video games themselves that makes them addictive? So, if video games are a behavioral addiction, what are the actual psychological factors that make them so hard to put down?
Well, let's get into it then. Psychological factor number one, rewards. But I don't mean the kind where you just get a shiny new sword and a pat on the back.
Like a real sword or.
No, like in game.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Like a new weapon in game. Okay, okay,
Yes,
okay.
but if you did start getting an addiction about collecting swords, I wouldn't be against it necessarily.
You mean real swords this time?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
That'd be pretty cool. Like, I wouldn't immediately get in touch with my mental health professional if this was the case.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
sure. Thanks for that, I guess.
No. We're actually talking about dopamine. So, every time you beat a level, you complete a quest, you unlock a new trophy, your brain does like this little happy dance.
If you compare it back in the arcade age, it was a lot simpler since you only had one goal: survive long enough to beat the high score. So you make use of that quarter you just put in, right? But in today's games, it's full on dopamine disco, I feel like.
That's right, yeah. Things are like way more intense now. There's several gameplay loops that hit you again and again and again with the dopamine hit. So you enter a new level, you complete a quest, you get loot, you upgrade yourself, and perhaps you unlock an achievement along the way too. And you repeat the cycle forever and forever and forever, over and over again. And all of the time, your brain is doing, that dopamine disco that you're talking about.
Yeah, and don't forget, right? Because dopamine is traditionally your reward chemical released when you accomplish serious life goals like getting a job you've been trying so hard to get or graduating from college.
Yeah, exactly. Big deals. But instead of a diploma, we're getting like +2 strength boots, but like so many times in the span of just minutes.
So, are you saying that video games are like having an infinite supply of cupcakes that make you feel successful?
Well, yes, precisely, exactly. But this is more like, you're eating like 30 of these cupcakes and you're still up at 3 in the morning, and those 30 cupcakes you destroyed in like 3 minutes.
Oh, God, that's a lot of sugar, isn't it?
It's sugar overload. Perhaps a sugar addiction, you might say.
Yeah. But still, though, this system isn't evil necessarily. It's also what makes games fun. But the danger is when our brains start chasing the next win, like your life depends on it.
So, what happens when we are bombarded with all of these little achievements? We want more of them, of course. And you might say we get compelled to keep on going. So, this is where I would draw a good example of our good friend Brad. So, he will stay up until 5 in the morning just to get another platinum trophy.
Right, so in his defense, his brain thinks he's securing food for winter, but he's really just farming meaningless bragging rights from us, right?
Yes, that's all he is doing. But rewards are only half of the story. The other half is the second psychological factor, which is immersion or the escape from reality. So instead of those gameplay loops we were talking about, which is kind of like the superficial thing about video games, it's just the kind of mechanics that you do. But what about, the art, the story, and the music of a game that, they can grab you so hard that you literally forget everything else going on around you, and time is just a suggestion now. It doesn't really exist.
So this is where Hungarian psychologist, I will completely butcher this pronunciation of his name, by the way, Mihai Robert Csikszentmihalyi, I think. This is where he comes in.
Should we just go with his middle name, Robert?
Yeah, it might be easier, isn't it?
It might be easier for us doofuses.
I don't mean to disrespect, by the way. It's just easier. But yes.
The problem is not with Robert. The problem is with us.
100%. So Robert came up with the theory of flow back in 1975.
Yeah, so this, by the way, is totally unrelated to video games, even though it sounds like it is something that belongs so much to video game culture. So he was studying what happens when people get completely lost in what they're doing. And you can think of it basically as, being in the zone. This is what he was researching on like a true scientific psychological level.
So flow happens when challenge and skill are perfectly balanced. So it's not too easy, not too hard. That's the magic sweet spot where hours just disappear and we forget to blink.
Like when you play Clair Obscur Expedition 33, Game of the Year, hopefully.
That's a good example, me playing Clair Obscur, compared to when I'm playing, let's say, Elden Ring, because I feel like the challenge is a bit too high for someone who's a noob like me.
Ah, yes, and this is also an example of me playing Elden Ring, because for me it's just way too easy.
Oh, right, okay.
Haha. Yeah, that's a lie. But yeah, basically video games hacked our productive Zen mode. They hacked being in the zone for us. So next, let's talk about psychological factoid number 3, which is unpredictability, or psychologists call it variable ratio reinforcement, which is just a fancy way of saying you'll never know when you will win.
Yes, so that's the exact same psychology that makes slot machines so hypnotizing and addictive. You don't know when that rare item will drop or what is inside the loot box. So you keep saying, you know what, just one more go. I'll take a spin.
Yeah, so this is where we can use our good friend Brad again as an example. Whenever he is hunting for some 1% hidden trophy behind of a bush, that's basically unpredictability that he's so obsessed about. I wonder if Brad even knows how trophies work, by the way.
Why are you trashing Brad in this episode?
He's just a very good example to use sometimes.
We love you, Brad. Sorry about that, but hey. And it's not just loot boxes anymore. Modern games use the same tactics. Daily logins, random rewards, time-limited events.
And it isn't just video games anymore either. Other things have also started using this tactic, like Duolingo, for example. Like, Gabby, you remember when I started saying to you, hey, are you playing Duolingo again?
Hey, Duolingo is not a game. I'm learning German competitively.
Right. Of course you are, darling. But this is exactly how they get you to spend more time on it and make sure that you keep coming back every day because God forbid that you lose your 1000 plus day streak, right?
Is that a challenge?
No, no, no. It's not. You're supposed to be learning, in your own time, attentively, and not because you're trying to stay in the Diamond League.
But anyway, enough Duolingo talk, right?
Right. Let's get on with our last psychological factor, which is, I would like to think, the most human of all psychological factors, actually, because this is about social belonging.
Yeah, we don't want to let our friends down when we've promised them to beat an Elden Ring boss, for example, or support our guild during raid night in World of Warcraft.
For some players, their gaming group is totally their main social circle. It's their main group of friends, it is their tribe, and sometimes even their whole sense of purpose in a community sense.
Which makes it really hard to step away, right? Because you're not logging out of a game for yourself. It feels like you're walking away from people who count on you, or you feel like they count on you.
Yeah, and speaking about people that count on you, let's talk about the industry that really counts on your wallet. So let's discuss the video game industry and how they actively contribute to getting players addicted.
Okay, so the first one is arcade. Back in the day, arcade games were the perfect profit machine. The goal was simple: make you drop as many coins as possible as fast as possible.
Yeah, a coin drop per minute was the metric. Games were tuned so that you would hit game over within just a few minutes. But then what if you really got hooked into the game? What if you kept using your quarters and you started getting better and better and better at the game? Well, this is when the arcade machines would quite naturally have like a really steep learning curve, like it sparked extremely hard, because nothing motivates like the phrase insert coin to continue.
Honestly, part of me is a little jealous that we missed the golden age of the arcades, but you know.
Me too, but at least we didn't always have to beg our parents for money all the time to go play in the arcade, right?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we just had to beg our parents for a memory card.
Yeah, or the
Yeah.
expansion pack for the Nintendo 64. I still don't know how I managed to explain to my mom why this was a really important item to have. I had a console and I had games. Try explaining to your mother you need this stupid expansion pack for an extra 4 megabytes of RAM. Explain that to your parents.
I don't think you probably did. You're just like, I want this. And your mom just caved,
Yeah, I
basically.
was very persuasive and cute.
But yeah, so that's arcades. So let's move on to the next industry. What about MMORPGs? The online worlds that really tested our self control.
So, EverQuest is one early example that really got you hooked into the game. Players even gave it the nickname Evercrack because of just how addictive it was. It wasn't just about the quests in Evercrack, it was actually about the long term goals and the social bonds you would have built with your clans and guilds. Turning off the game actually felt like you were genuinely losing something valuable right now when you turned off the game. Like, oh, like it was quite a big deal to turn off the game.
Yeah, and World of Warcraft took that to the next level as well. Some players clocked over 24,000 hours. That's over 1,000 real life days.
Wow, that's more than 3 years, constantly playing 24/7. That's insane. What about mobile games though, like Candy Crush? Like on the surface, it's cute, it's colorful, it's innocent. But what about the energy mechanic? That's some really sinister stuff when you stop to think about it. Because you run out of lives, and then you're either made to wait or pay to play again immediately. But you know what? This waiting period, this actually increases your craving. It's not like a security measure put in place to make you stop playing. It's definitely made to make you start playing a lot more.
Yeah, you can imagine it like a dealer saying, sorry, charm, out of stock. Come back later or pay for express delivery if you want it now.
I am not paying for express delivery. You know what? I'm just gonna stick to Tetris instead. It's better, it's more fun, and way less greedy.
But still, though, there's a risk of addiction if you can't stop playing Tetris, right? So it's the same thing.
Yeah, but at least you're not spending, all your hard-earned cash on
Hey,
microtransactions.
so are we talking about money or are we talking about addiction?
We're
Yeah.
talking about addiction, but there's better and there's worse addictions. Basically, your Tetris addiction is better than your Candy Crush addiction.
But speaking of industry, though, should we talk about electronic arts next? Just as a small little case study, probably, because EA has basically turned psychology into a business model, right?
Yeah, so we have an interview from Manveer Hare, who was one of the game developers working on Mass Effect 3. So he told in an interview that EA and those big publishers in general only care about the highest return on investment. They don't actually care about what the players want, they care about what the players will pay for. You need to understand the amount of money that's at play with microtransactions. I've seen people literally spend $15,000 on Mass Effect multiplayer cards. $15,000. That's absolutely crazy.
Then there was also Kerry Hopkins, the EA executive who in 2019 tried to defend the notorious FIFA game's loot box mechanic, a pay to win microtransaction system where you could win new players, basically. So she told a UK Parliament committee that in EA, they don't even call them loot boxes, but instead they refer to them as surprise mechanics. I mean, different names, same thing, right? Actually.
Yeah, you can polish snot, but it still won't turn into candy floss, will it?
Yeah, exactly. She even compared them to Kinder Eggs and how it was all quite ethical and fun.
Yeah, of course, because nothing says ethical and fun like gambling for a 92 rated striker, where you've tried to get him countless of times using microtransactions in a completely, let's call it gambling. Can we just say it is gambling?
It
Like,
is
come on,
gambling.
it is gambling, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah, I know that's pretty grim, isn't it? Industry's hand on video game addiction. But with all that, let's explore gaming's darkest subject matter, deaths related to video games. The earliest documented cases of fatal gaming sessions came from Asia, places where online, especially internet cafe, gaming culture is much stronger compared to the West, and it hit harder earlier.
Yeah, so the first case comes from 2002 in South Korea, and this was about Kim Kyung-jae. So he played Mu online for around 86 hours straight in a PC bang. And PC bangs are basically South Korean internet cafes, and they were used mainly for playing games on gaming PCs. And according to the BBC, when this happened back in 2002, there was over 25,000 of these PC banks in South Korea. But very interestingly for me is that these places were open 24/7. But you told me, Gabby, that's quite normal for Asia, actually, yeah?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, at least back then. I'm not too familiar anymore with nowadays, but yeah, internet cafes for 24/7 seem to be pretty common. But yeah, in this case, the detective that investigated the case said that Kyung Jae only took short breaks to smoke and used the restroom. He collapsed from deep vein thrombosis caused by sitting immobile for days. The detective also explained to the BBC that young people didn't have many places to go in those days, so they referred to these PC banks instead.
And the next case only happened 10 days later. This is when Lian Wen Cheng from Taiwan met a similar tragic fate. He was only 28 years old when he was found dead after a 32-hour session at an internet cafe.
Staff said he'd only paused briefly for snacks and the toilet. His heart simply stopped, with fatigue and dehydration listed as likely causes. He was found on the floor of the cafe's toilet by a member of staff at 7 a.m. on Saturday, foaming at the mouth and bleeding from the nose.
But Asia is certainly not the only place where gaming addiction related deaths occur and have occurred. Let's talk about some other notable but equally tragic cases that were in the media from around the world. So here's one from 2011 in the UK, and this was Chris Staniforth. He was a 20-year-old who played for up to 12 hours at a stretch. And one of these times, he developed deep vein thrombosis and a blood clot formed in his leg that traveled to his lungs.
Another case is in 2015 from Russia. A player known as Rustam. He was a 17-year-old with a broken leg, spent 22 days almost non-stop playing Defense of the Ancients or Dota. Quite familiar with that. Yes, so doctors also blame thrombosis, again, because of long term immobility.
And one more case to talk about. This was from 2017, so a little bit more recent. This came from the USA, and it was about Brian Vinault, also known as Poshy Bird. So he was a father of three, attempting a 24-hour charity Twitch stream of World of Tanks. So after around 22 hours in, he was taking a cigarette break outside, off camera, but never returned. So the official cause wasn't released to us, but it's thought that it was exhaustion and stress suspected in, yeah, causing the death.
So, across different continents, the pattern is hauntingly familiar. The first one is immobility and physical strain, so that cause the blood clots, dehydration, and exhaustion. Lack of sleep and nutrition, because they don't really stop to take those breaks, and also psychological escape.
But what is quite a contrast, actually, is how in Asia, gaming addiction became more of a public crisis, and there was laws put in place like curfews, and there was a lot more rehab centers being put in place, and there was also a lot more moral panic involved. Whereas in the West, it seems to be treated more as like a personal tragedy. They are framed as isolated incidents of cautionary tales.
Yeah, which is ironic, right? Because they're same human story, just different lenses. When endless engagement meets the need to keep on playing, the results can turn fatal. So, player one, remember to eat, drink, and move around once in a while when you're playing video games because we at the Gaming History Club want you to play games for a long lifetime and not just one long session.
So then it comes to no surprise to us that the World Health Organization has officially, finally, recognized gaming disorder as a mental health diagnosis in the International Classification of Diseases.
What does come as a bit of a surprise, though, is how long it took after these cases we've spoke about. Even though the first cases that were officially linked to game addiction occurred in the early 2000s, it wasn't until 2019 that it was officially recognized.
The silver lining here, though, is the guidelines from WHO, which I'll read out word for word. Studies suggest that gaming disorder affects only a small proportion of people who engage in digital or video game activities. However, people who partake in gaming should be alert to the amount of time that they spend on gaming activities, particularly when it comes to the exclusion of other daily activities, as well as to any changes in their physical or psychological health and social functioning that could be attributed to their pattern of gaming behavior.
Speaking of official action, right, another example is what China did to fight gaming disorder. They take a particularly strong stance. In 2021, for example, they introduced what they called a gaming crackdown. They set curfews and limiting how long players can spend at an internet cafe.
Yeah, that's right. So China has a long history of gaming crackdown, but I think that's something that we can discuss much more in depth in a different episode because, well, we just wanted to mention some recent highlights at the end of our timeline, right?
Yeah, that's true. And I think we can all agree that video game addiction is a deep topic to discuss. So, player one, if you're concerned for yourself or a loved one about possible video game addiction and related problems, please talk to your healthcare provider or a mental health professional.
So, with all that in mind, Player One, I hope you found this episode informative. Stay safe and look after your friends. I'll leave you with this question to ponder. Is it the player's responsibility to self regulate, or is it the industry's responsibility not to exploit? Let us know your thoughts and send us a message from our website, gaminghistory.club.
As usual, new episodes of Gaming History Club are released every other Wednesday, so make sure you subscribe and follow us on our social media. We're on Instagram and Facebook as Gaming History Club.
Come back in a couple of weeks, Player One. Next time will be another Game Law special, this time with Lavender Town Syndrome. Did Pokemon's hypnotic music turn people insane? See ya.